North Korea cannot be allowed to develop a nuclear bomb. We have to be very firm about it.
We will not settle for anything less than the complete, verifiable, and irreversible elimination of North Korea's nuclear weapons program.
We stand with our ally South Korea and insist that North Korea keeps its commitment to abandon nuclear weapons.
For decades, American presidents and their advisors have grappled with how to stop North Korea's nuclear program, including our next guest, Christopher Hill, the former U.S. ambassador to South Korea. Under President George W. Bush's administration, he headed up the U.S. delegation to the six-party talks to resolve the North Korean nuclear crisis, and he later served as U.S. ambassador to Iraq. Ambassador Hill, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
When you were head of the delegation to the six-party talks, North Korea lied, obfuscated, and then pursued more missile tests. And as we saw, they've continued to do that. Why should President Trump expect anything different?
Well, first of all, the importance of negotiating with them in the six-party context was to force China to take a role, and of course they were in the chair of this whole process. But secondly, and I think this really brings us to the present day with Vice President Pence's trip, it was important to show the South Koreans that we will do everything we can, including negotiating. And so the days where the U.S. would negotiate with North Korea and leave the South Koreans at the airport wondering what was going on, those days are over, and we worked very closely with South Korea, and I think in the process brought the U.S. and South Korea together. As for the North Koreans, you bet it's a tough proposition. But I agree with all those presidents you just showed that we cannot allow them to develop a nuclear weapon.
From what you've seen of the Trump administration, and I know you listened to General McMaster there, what are you hearing that's encouraging you, besides what you just talked about with Vice President Pence?
Well, I think, first of all, it is very encouraging that they are in close contact with the Chinese, that they seem to be trying to work things together with China. That seemed to be an elusive concept at a certain point in time, and yet that, I think, is very much happening. Secondly, of course, is the Vice President's visit, because South Korea has some 20 million people within artillery range of North Korea, and they essentially worry about two things. They worry about a preemptive action by the U.S. where they weren't included in it. They also worry about talking to the Chinese kind of over their heads, and they kind of take the view, look, there shouldn't be anything about us without us. And so I think the effort to kind of clue them in, to be close to them, to listen to them, to discuss the strategy, I think is very crucial. I'd like to see at some point a U.S. ambassador named to South Korea, but I guess that takes a long time for this administration.
I guess that's taking a long time in several places. Let's go to President Trump, though. You've mentioned others. You've mentioned the vice president. He's had some very aggressive language. Does that help or make it more difficult?
Well, I think he's trying to out North Korean, the North Koreans, so let's see if that works. Certainly, it makes people nervous when they're not quite sure what he means by it. And, you know, great powers can't really bluff. So when you talk in those terms, you got to be prepared to back it up. And I guess that's what worries people the most. That said, I certainly appreciate the fact that he's understood this is a major issue. I mean, if I were President Trump, I wouldn't want to go before the American people in 2020 and say, well, you know, we gave it the junior college try and we decided there's nothing we can do about this.
And when you look at what's happening now and through all these past presidents, it's very dangerous today. I mean, everybody I've talked to says the threat is very different now because they are close to getting a nuclear missile on an ICBM. When you look at it, how tense do you think everyone should be?
I think it is, we've come to a moment where this is kind of different from the past. First of all, they've had over 25 missile tests. They're working on a whole new generation of missiles. Of course, one of them failed in the last 24 hours, but that doesn't mean they'll try again. So it's a new generation of missiles, and clearly they're working on a warhead design for nuclear devices. So this is, I think, a a very serious matter, and it's coming down the tracks. And people often take the view, well, somehow this is all about their regime survival. This is how they'll survive being a nuclear weapons country. Actually, I think they're more ambitious about it. They see this as a means to somehow decouple the U.S. from its ally in South Korea, from its ally in Japan, and somehow create a situation whereby, at least in theory, holding the U.S. at risk, the U.S. would be less willing to participate in a conflict on the Korean Peninsula were it to come to that. So they have ambitious plans for this, and I think we need to be very clear about the need to stop them. And I'm particularly discouraged when I hear people talking about, well, maybe we can freeze their tests in return for freezing our exercises with South Korea. That is not going to get us in the right direction at all.
Okay, well, we'll hope we go in the right direction. Thanks very much for joining us, Ambassador Hill.